I did graduate from UW in 2010 with my master's degree and went on to work in industry for the past 10 years. So I worked with Greg at Plexus for about 7 of those, and then came to work for Phoenix in Madison, Wisconsin. All of those roles were mechanical design engineer roles, so very much in the engineering space of things. Just to kind of tie it back to what you guys are working on, kind of what my senior design project was about. My project was designing a gurney for the MedFlight helicopter out of UW Hospital in Madison. So, of course, the way you're probably finding out, budgets are not, freely flowing when you're a student. So, we couldn't make an actual prototype or, proof of concept, but we did go through the process there. So just kind of, something to compare for your senior design. Why don't you go to the next slide, Greg? Okay. And then, yeah, I won't talk on this too long, just, again, so you guys kind of know what my background is. So at Plexus, primarily working on healthcare and life sciences products. So working with Greg specifically on an infusion pump design, which took about 3 years of my time there. And then probably the one that most folks are most familiar with is the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, which is actually manufactured by Plexus, working on design for manufacturability improvements there. Then I transitioned to Phoenix in Madison, Wisconsin. We produced compact neutron generators, so kind of the opposite of X-ray machines. And there's a whole bunch of cool stuff you can do with neutrons, including imaging and nuclear fuel scanning and medical isotope production. Probably the one that everyone wants to hear the most about for me is the explosives detection. So we had a proof of concept that we did with the military, where we were showing that if you shoot neutrons into the ground and look at the gamma ray signatures that come out, you can try to identify a blob of nitrogen, which is a bomb. So, this is a proof of concept field unit that we put together. Obviously, you wouldn't have a telehandler in a combat situation, but it was able to show that the concept worked. And then this last summer, I transitioned to a research grad student position at University of Illinois. Going to be in the Digimat program, which is combining data science and material science.
The students are excited about the Coke machine. How much free soda did you get? Did you get
we got no free soda. It was the worst thing ever.
Bull crap.
I know.
Yeah, I drink too much soda and my teeth are running out of my head, but oh well. Who are you working with at Illinois, by the way? Just curious.
Professor Hawley Johnson.
Oh, Harley Johnson. That guy runs like marathons and crap. That guy's crazy.
He is very motivated, yes.
And he's like in his 60s or something, isn't he? He's like pretty old.
He's doing pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool.
All right.
So Ben, you were on the wrong part of the project, because once it got into manufacturing, I was working on another project that was on the other side of the production floor, and they had a machine sitting out, and it was pretty much put a quarter in the thing and get a big giant glass of soda. So that was fun. Yeah. Put the quarter in there. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So good afternoon. My name is Greg Hawley. I am also a Madison grad, 1992, and I've done a variety of things, some of which I'm qualified for and some of which I'm definitely not qualified for. The unqualified part is DJ. I do not belong in front of a microphone on a radio station, and that's why I only did it for a summer. My partner in crime ended up being a radio director of a radio station in Arkansas, but that is not something that I either am good at nor would want to do. But the direction of my career, I started off at Madison and did an internship at a company that I think is now owned by, I don't know, they get passed around a little bit, but designing industrial control equipment, largely used in process control for making chemicals and things, and then landed at Plexus here in Neenah, Wisconsin, about 100 miles northwest of MSOE. And I've been a software engineer originally, and moved into project management a number of years ago. And before Ben left Plexus, he and I worked together, as he said, and I did become an honorary mechanical engineer, having designed a 3D printable clock mechanism and eating all the mechanical engineers' donuts to the point where I started bringing donuts in the rotation. So while my degree has nothing to do with mechanical engineering, I like things engineering, and that intersects with mechanisms. So I'll plant my flag there. So with that, my senior design project mimicked a lot of the work going on with some factory automation activities. Fellow here, he worked as a co-op for Inland Steel in East Chicago, Illinois, or East Chicago, Indiana, and we designed a controllable warehouse system that stored Jolly Rancher candies using a 33 megahertz deck station, which at the time was like a $12,000 engineering workstation. So times have changed.
You're just working on all things sugar related, it sounds like.
That's right. It's all about sugar, right? So Plexus, it's hard to have brand recognition with Plexus because we don't sell things. We do a lot of work for other companies and support them as they sell products. So we're based in Neenah. The map there has dots all over the place. There are 4 design centers in the United States, in Neenah, in Raleigh, North Carolina, in Guadalupe, and in Boise, Idaho. So we've got a number of activities going on there, and then manufacturing throughout the world. A large footprint in China and Malaysia, in Mexico, here in Wisconsin, which is where we started out. And we design a lot of products for folks and manufacture them or design them. So it's really helping our customers in areas where they need help or they don't have bandwidth to do work together. Some companies that probably have some brand recognition, Trek Bikes, we did some e-bike stuff for them. We do work with Honeywell, a lot of stuff that we can't talk about other than the fact that we can say that we work for Honeywell. GE Healthcare out of Milwaukee, we've done a lot of designs and a lot of manufacturing for a lot of the medical imaging equipment. And recently, kind of adding to the list here, Kydell, they're a manufacturer of lab instrumentation, and we're manufacturing the high-speed COVID tester, the equipment that you take the reagent and get the sample and then put it in the equipment. And it does the analysis to determine if you have COVID. So cool stuff. Was kind of a fire drill over the summertime here, getting that production line ramped up to significantly increase their capacity to manufacture a product in the hopes of getting us all back to a semblance of normalcy here. So as we get started, there's a dose of humility that I think we got to apply to this. You can go online or go to a bookstore and you can find an untold number of books about project management. A lot of it is silly stuff. There are some great nuggets of information there. But I think as you go through things and think about planning projects and think about how to work as an engineer when you graduate from MSOE and perhaps go out into industry or go into other endeavors, as you plan things, it's a matter of using your intelligence and thinking through things and applying good, sensible practices to the specifics of what you're trying to do. There aren't any magic bullets. There's nobody out there that's going to be able to tell you exactly what you need to know. and planning comes through good practices and some experience that you'll gain as you use those practices. So take what we say with a grain of salt. Now, having said that, my background, at least for the last bunch of years, is in project management. When I started as a project manager, I was really like, wow, do I really want to become a project manager? Because in the end, I just become the guy who sits in front of a spreadsheet and counts dollars and hours and makes pretty graphs. That can't be any fun. It's close to business. And as an engineer, we derided business guys with a certain amount of derision. But what I found and came to learn is that there's a lot of things that you add to your capability in addition to just being an engineer. I see myself as an engineering manager, not a manager. So it's an addition. But there is a whole process, a body of knowledge to using and applying project management to work. This is kind of the overview of integrated project management overview. There's a lot of detail here. There's the Project Management Institute. They're a group of folks that are set up to help project managers organize their worldview, and they have a whole framework of information and processes and practices that kind of can give you that basic understanding of what's going on. It's very detailed, and if you're ever interested in seriously pursuing project management, I think the book is like $50. It's not an exciting read, but it provides a lot of good context.
And I'll kind of jump in here too for a second.
Yeah.
Greg was saying, did he really want to become a project manager, right? And from my perspective, I don't have that desire to kind of go that path. But as an engineer, I'll say that it is as important for us to understand project management and kind of what's expected, and kind of take those tips and tricks and kind of build them into our workday. Because at the end of the day, you work with project managers, and it is still important for us to all, kind of talk the same language. So even if you don't have any interest in going into project management, it's still an important thing to understand.
And you're going to have to sell your designs to project managers. So.
You are, yes.
And we're mean, cranky people.
Yes, you seem so cranky. You need some sugar.
So, as a project manager, this is kind of the purest view of things within what we do at Plexus. How does that differ, right? So what you had from the PMBOK is kind of a very specific prescriptive way of doing project management. And it sometimes comes in the absence of managing a customer and relationships. So there's really a lighter side to all of this. And my view on project management is a five basic tenets of what happens. The first is Kung Fu. There's a level of working that borders on martial arts at times, that is revolving around managing expectations and negotiating with people to get to what you need to have done in a respectful but firm and polite kind of way. The second part of it is games. With project management, you have to have people, you have to have budgets to do what you need to do, and the game of aligning all that together is important, and it's crucial. Engineering is applying science to real world projects with finite resources, and the game of making that all fit is important. Before you get to that point, there's this thing that I refer to as ish, which is estimation. It's a little of this, a little of that. It's kind of squishy, and you don't always know what it is. And it's probably the hardest thing that you'll be asked to do as a new engineer is a manager comes to you, supervisor, and says, "How long is it going to take you to do that?" You'll find that it's hard. One of the cautions that I would have as you start your senior design projects is, don't overestimate what you're going to be able to do. It's super easy to have grandiose visions of what you're going to do, and to way overestimate the amount of time that you're going to have and the effort you can apply to it. So there's that, take what you think that it's going to take and multiply it by pi or some irrational number that's bigger than 1, because that's what it's really going to take. But estimating is one part of it.
Yeah, I've kind of encouraged the students to think about biting off a smaller chunk of their project, or like keeping it small and having that very well refined, as opposed to trying to design something enormous like a whole vehicle or something,
Absolutely. And you can stage it. What can you do? There's this, what we do, can do is this notion of within product development. The Toyota guys did this. If you imagine you're going to come out with a new version of an alternator, there may be some cool, fancy new way to do it with some, hard to manufacture and hard to characterize, materials. And there might be just a couple of tweaks you're going to do to an existing design. And you may try to do the bigger one, but you have to have a fallback position to something that, at the end of the year, you're going to have something you can show off. So after that, there's this notion of dragon slaying. Things don't go right. You can plan all day long. We'll talk about that, but things will happen. People will get sick, risks occur, things break. And as a project manager, kind of putting on your armor and going off and fighting the dragons once they happen is important to have the courage to go do that and fight down the battles of things that might go wrong. Oftentimes, either as an engineer, something that you didn't expect to go wrong and wasn't your fault, or as a manager, things happen. Holding that and owning it and going and doing something about it and having the courage to admit that something's wrong is crucial to getting to the answer, because holding bad information is really dangerous, because you don't have the opportunity to get help. So that's dragon slaying. The fifth tenet in my thing is schmooze, and this boils down to what was said earlier is sometimes you have to sell the stuff. And in my job, I'm selling things a lot of times. I'm selling, this morning to my senior management of, are you confident you're going to be done on time? And it's like, yes, I am. A good analogy is kind of like a duck. You're swimming away as people are watching you, swimming across the lake. It looks like you're got everything, all together, but underneath the water line, you're paddling like crazy, trying to get done. So some of that is just good salesmanship, and it can sound political. It can seem kind of weird, but being able to portray confidence in the face of uncertainty is an important activity. And with that, may the odds be ever in your favor, because sometimes you need that too. All right.
All right. So, kind of taking that, bigger picture of what project management is, and then kind of distilling it down to what you guys are working on with your, immediate projects and your senior design project. Kind of how does that interact? And I think the first thing before you kind of get too deep into it is really to take a step back and think about what you need to deliver and what that means to different people. So in your senior design class, that might be, making sure that you're meeting all the requirements and everything. But when you get out into industry, it really depends on who you talk to. That, kind of end solution could be very different. So you talk to marketing, they might have one perspective, and you talk to the engineering, they might have another. So, there's nothing worse than starting out on a project and working with, your engineering companions at the customer site, for months, and then you bring in another stakeholder and, they tell you you've been designing a roller coaster instead of a tire swing, right? So, keep in mind that you really want to try to bring people together and understand best, what you're trying to do before you get too far down the road. You want to hop to the next slide, Greg? Okay, so, kind of walking through the steps that, I've taken on past projects and kind of what's been common among all the projects. Like we said, first step, get your definition of done established. What are the deliverables and the things that you're going to give at the end of your project to the customer or to your professor? So, what are these physical things? Documents, presentations, prototypes, reports, tests, all these different things. And it's not just enough to know what that list is, but you also have to make sure that it's clearly defined and quantifiable. So a lot of times, we would get requirements from customers that are like, it has to be squishy and it has to make me feel good. And that's great for establishing kind of this marketing, perspective and what they want. But then as engineers, we take those into things that can actually be quantified. And yes, I've met that requirement. So, even if the customer doesn't want to give you something that's defined, you can turn that into something that's defined and then give it back to them and say, okay, how's this sound for your requirement?
Yeah, we engineers, we don't have feelings. We just like numbers. That's all.
We are cut and dry. That's right.
Yeah, no feelings, no squishy.
That's right.
Can't test it. It doesn't exist.
That's right. And that's important from a monetary standpoint at the end too, because the customer won't pay you unless you give them what what you need to have. So next up, okay, now you got your list of what you need to provide. What are the integration dates for those, right? So it might not just be the end of the project where you have to give something to the customer. Very other disciplines that are relying on you as well. So software engineering or hardware or test or something, and they need stuff to keep their end of the project moving along too. So writing out, what those integration dates are is really going to help frame how you tackle the problem. Next up, what inputs do you need? So every project that you work on, you're going to need something from somebody, whether it's, a data set or whether it is a list of standards that you have to meet, or whether it's, how much money you're going to get. These are all things that you need to be given before you can really start on the project. And, writing that out, it helps you define what you need, but then it also helps, the project managers understand at the end of a project, hey, it took the customer 4 weeks to get us this, deliverable input that we needed. How could we possibly get done in the time frame that we wanted to if we didn't have the inputs that we needed? So it helps both you and it helps, your project manager and your team. So then, after this, now you're kind of getting into the point where, okay, we have what we need to provide. What are the tasks associated with those deliverables? And, I can go off and create my list of tasks that I have to do, but chances are Greg's going to come up with a different list, and what I've seen that works really well in the past is you put up on the screen, your list of deliverables and just let everybody just noodle on it for a while and just make their own list of tasks and then throw them all together into the, onto the table. And you're going to have a lot of overlap, but chances are you're going to get something new from somebody that will, kind of help make sure you have a full list of tasks that has to get done. Another key part of that is to give each of these tasks estimates for time. Now, again, it's going to be, somewhat squishy, but at least if you have kind of an order of magnitude estimate, 4 hours, 8 hours, 20 hours, whatever you want to do, at least you'll kind of be able to, roughly schedule your tasks and the next steps that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add to that, estimating is hard, but take your best guess. So then when you add up all the estimates, you can go, well, do we have something that makes good sense? And then the other thing you can do is track against it, right? Oftentimes it's more important just to have, kind of a map of where you're going to understand, are you going to run out of gas before you get there, than, having a perfect estimate. You're not going to have the perfect estimate, but knowing about where you're at can give you intelligence of whether or not you need to make course corrections. If you start falling behind, what can you do about it? You don't know that if you don't know roughly what you thought it was going to take.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And then kind of along those lines, for each task, that you have to do, make sure that you assign an owner to each one of them. And maybe not to the individual task level, but, at least deliverables side of things. And it's important to not share ownership with somebody else. Now, that doesn't mean that the owner's doing all the work. You can delegate as much work as needed, but having one person own it and be responsible prevents you from kind of pointing fingers back and forth at the end and saying, well, I thought you were going to cover that part of it, or you were going to. So one owner per task or deliverable, and then delegate from there. Okay, So, now we've generated all of these deliverables and tasks and time estimates and everything. Now you got to kind of put it into something that takes shape and kind of gives you something that's useful. And you can spend, your whole semester putting together your project plan if you want, and kind of fiddling with it as much as you want. So there's kind of a happy balance between, how much effort is needed, but, a simple spreadsheet might be sufficient for smaller projects. As you kind of get up into larger ones, Microsoft Project or ProjectLibre are good choices to kind of be able to show interdependencies and task duration and assigned resources and that type of thing. So
is that ProjectLibre, is that free, or is that?
Yeah,
it is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm all about LibreOffice and the open source ideas. So I think
we have Microsoft Project here that the students can use, but maybe in the future something else.
Yeah, and you do have to be careful with Microsoft Project because they're trying to sell you on all the features, and there might be too many features for a lot of the stuff that we can be doing. So, oftentimes a spreadsheet is good enough.
I have found that with Microsoft Project, it's very overwhelming if you've not used it a lot to just like jump into it and do stuff. So
yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg kind of alluded to this earlier, but by having these estimates and putting this into a plan, you're able to kind of stress test your project. So, what you'll hear a bunch of times, project managers talk about is critical path. So this is kind of the thing that if you add up all of these dependencies, what is going to drive your last date at the end of the project when you can give something to the customer? And, you'll have a lot of other tasks that aren't as, interdependent and, maybe can be pushed around, but that critical path, you want to make sure that you're tracking to that throughout your course of your project, or else you're going to, no matter what you do on your other parts, you're going to end up pushing out at the end of the day. And, the other thing Greg kind of mentioned is reserving some buffer. I know this is kind of it can be kind of a joke, right? Because you never end up with copious amounts of free time at the end of a project, but building it into your schedule, trying to, keep things reasonably, bucketized and tracking to that at least gives you a chance of fixing things at the end when they inevitably go long and still delivering on time. So,
stuff happens.
Stuff happens always.
Yes, stuff. Yeah, so if you have Project on your PC or ProjectLibre, either of them are reasonable tools to use. You can get wrapped around the axle. Honestly, even in industry, you can take Microsoft Project well beyond what it's useful for. For us, as managing a team, to have tasks under a couple weeks in duration when you've got a big team is more resolutions that you need. And if you start trying to assign resources, project can go and allocate time for individual resources. So if Dilbert had 17 tasks, you could tell it to. Still got some background noise there.
Yeah, we got rid of it. We're good. Go ahead.
All right. So you can have project go and figure all that out, and it can be a task that you can spend weeks just fussing around with. I've been on projects where they've hired someone just to manage the Microsoft project. That seems extreme even in those circumstances, but having a good idea of what's going on, that's not a bad idea. And this can help you with that and help you drive it in a sensible way. To go off and do that, to just basically plan some essential things. You can get, what is your best guess of a duration? Who is the one owner? What tasks have to be done in parallel and in series, and how do they stitch together? This project could fit on a single 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and it can tell you a lot about what you need to do. And it can remind you, as an example, that it's 4 weeks to get expensive parts, so you better order them early, or you're not going to have them when you need them. And those are the sort of things that a project plan can help you lose sight of, because it's really easy to forget some of those side tasks that have a long lead time, that if you don't take care of them right away, when you're working on the core mission critical stuff that requires a lot of intense thought, you can lose sight of. So it's a useful task. Just finished today. We're designing a medical device. The project team is 50 people. We spent a day and a quarter for 50 people doing nothing but planning. So the effort is worth it, and it's worth the investment. And that was 50 times 8 times 1 1/4. Something like 400 or 500 hours of effort to do planning. And so that's a huge investment, but a worthy one in the context of making sure that you've got things organized. So don't underestimate the value of the time to do planning.
I think I saw somebody pop up with a question or a hand raised.
There was a hand there from Spencer. I don't know if you had a question, Spencer, or you just maybe misclicked the button, but if you got a question, type it out in the chat and we'll get back to it.
Okay, so this is kind of one other quick alternative I want to mention is as an alternative to project or Libre planning is Wrike. This is something I used at Phoenix quite a bit. It's very nice because it kind of combines the project Gantt chart side of things along with the agile methodology and kind of having sprints and task management that way. So I do know that there are free options, plans available for smaller groups. So it might be something if you guys are interested in pursuing for your teams. It's nice because it's all cloud-based, so you can kind of leverage it, share across the team. So just another alternative to consider.
Here at MSOE, your individual advisors for your individual teams should be pushing you towards creating some sort of schedule. It is part of our ABET accreditation is that we need to show that you guys have the ability to schedule something. So you will probably be using one of these softwares in the near future to be showing your advisors that you can do some scheduling. So good to maybe pay attention or make note of some of these projects, some of these softwares.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of options here, and honestly, I have projects. I use Project, but trying to find some alternatives. There's a bunch of them that are out there. If you have friends in software engineering, they may use sprint planning and use agile development. There's a number of tools out there, Jira being an example. And I think you can get a free version of that as a student to use that. Bunch of ways to go about it. I think it's not really I think in past years I've given this talk and I've put up an Excel spreadsheet. That may be sufficient, right? It's just what are the durations, what is dependent upon other things, and who owns stuff. That'll get you a long ways down the road.
Yeah, agreed.
So you get a plan, and you're off and starting to execute it. In the stuff happens category, sometimes you can't get everything, and there's within engineering, I think you're going to find that in general, you're always trying to optimize scarce resources, and it really doesn't matter what your domain of work is. There's going to be stuff that you have to figure out what's going on and what's important, because people will always want more, and they will always want it faster and cheaper. That's just kind of the way the world works, because we're dealing in scarce things, and it's difficult to know where to go with that. But you have to appreciate that exists. As an engineer, the questions I ask is, what is definition of done? How long is it planned? And how much effort was planned to get it there? So when's it due? How long is it going to take? And what is the definition of done? And if those don't add up, then there's some discussions you have to have about what makes sense. And that's a useful endeavor, because getting something that's good is better than having something that's perfect sometimes, because you can achieve some needs without achieving all the needs. So just keeping that in mind and knowing that if you get boxed into a corner, sometimes the question is, what can you trade off to get yourself into a situation where you have something that is good enough.
And I think kind of quick thing on priorities and trade-offs. Keep in mind that, as a student right now, your assessment of this triangle is going to be very different than when you get into industry. So, you have right now you have very few dollars to spend and more time. Well, not more time, but your time is cheaper. Once you get into industry, it very well might make sense for you to outsource things, or go down to the hardware store and buy that part that you need, as opposed to spending 8 hours in the machine shop making it yourself, because you cost money and you're costing the project time and money. So just keep in mind that that trade-off changes as you move along.
Right now, you don't cost any money. Get to the machine shop and make it. Just kidding. But not really. Okay, keep going.
Cool. So, I guess, in the context of this planning, we kind of alluded to that, big Gantt charts and detailed plans, they exist. Like I talked about this morning, or earlier, this morning we finished up, a day and a half worth of planning here, and it makes some absolutely monstrous plans. In this case, a project that had a 914 line Gantt chart, even printed out like this, it goes above the top of the screen and below the bottom of the screen, and that was required. And in reality, if you look at that Gantt chart and you really dig into it, there probably aren't that many tasks that are actually active at any one point. So a lot of it, is just a matter of understanding all the moving pieces that might be in a multi-year project, but you're only going to be, actively doing a small portion of them. It's just keeping track of all the things that are surrounding the things you're working on. But doing that plan and spending some amount of plan time, creating a plan is the crucial thing. And as you move into larger and larger projects, you're going to find that that level of effort goes up, and there is no one size fits all. So I would expect that in a couple of hours you could do a really nice plan for a senior design project. If you're working on a feasibility phase for a project that might be months long, you might spend a day doing that. You work on a project that's a larger team, it's going to be a tremendous amount of effort, and it's going to have people dedicated to it, and that's okay. I think don't underplan, but also don't get wrapped around the axle of trying to create an uber plan that captures everything that might go on, because the challenge with that, if you decide you're going to get retentive about your plan, is that you'll spend all your time maintaining your plan, and that's probably not going to help you either. You want something that is a good roadmap for your efforts.
You don't want a to-do list, or one of the things is organize your to-do list. Right, absolutely. And one of the reasons that's important is that the plans need to be flexible. And there's a couple of good lines that come out of that. As a project manager, the first quotation I ever did was for Alan Bradley, of all places, and I had written this nice proposal. My guess is it was 1,000 hours of effort. I was scared because it was my first one, and as soon as I sent the proposal to my customer, I was like this moment of elation. Wow, I got it done. I hope it's right. Went home that night and I realized I forgot some stuff, and I just panicked. I remember being in a cold sweat going, oh, if I win this work, we're doomed from the beginning. I don't do that anymore because you create a little bit of a risk buffer, but you also appreciate that things are going to change. Eisenhower said plans are worthless, but planning is everything. That's a very true statement. There's a great German phrase here that I am not going to pronounce. I tried pronouncing it, and some folks from Lubeck kind of giggled at me because my German is horrible. But Philip talked about the fact that in military planning, no plan survives its first contact with the enemy, and that's true. Enemy here being science, industry, and economics. But in any case, once you start executing a plan, you need to have it and appreciate that you may have to modify it as you go along.
if you do a good plan, you probably don't have to throw it all away. You're probably just updating it. And that's what some of the value of the tools is, that they give you the chance to, make a change to one task, and it'll push and pull everything around based upon, the change you just made.
Okay, so we kind of mentioned agile product development a couple times here, and I just want to briefly touch on that as well, because I think there's some really important or good tips and tricks that you can kind of pull from it. So agile development is something that's used quite a bit in software development, and it's now starting to kind of bleed over to the other disciplines. But the high level summary of it is, you're taking your whole project and trying to break it down into smaller chunks or sprints. And for each sprint, you would want to produce something that you're going to give to the customer. And for software, that oftentimes might be usable code. For mechanical engineers, that might be a CAD model or something else. It might not be a physical thing, but the idea is that you're getting feedback early in the process, as opposed to waiting to that last integration date when something is due, and then they say, oh, you developed a tire swing instead of a rope ladder type of thing. So getting feedback early, failing often, those are good things to try to do and try to build into your project as you're kind of moving along. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I necessarily want to say about Agile method, other than knowing that it's there and that it's it can be useful even for mechanical engineers.
We got until about 2:50, by the way, guys.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 3 o'clock. Okay, great.
About 5. Yeah, we just got to give them some passing time, quote unquote. So.
We have 2 slides, so we're good to go. So
we're doing good. Yep.
Yeah.
So real quick, what I'll cover on here is a couple other things that you should at least consider when you're planning your project. One is have an open issues list. So in addition to your plan, you're going to get don't know the answer to or didn't foresee, and having one spot to put that is very important. Greg kind of touched on having a budget, and that is important even for smaller projects. Even as an engineer, when I'm told to go off and work on something, I would keep my own little budget so that I know whether I'm tracking to the bigger project budget. So just something to keep in mind, that you still want to do that even for a personal, if you're working on your chunk of the project. And then the last, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I guess I'd add on to that is that email threads are not a good way to track issues because they'll get lost in your inbox. That comes out of an email that's important, and you want to put it together. Have a document someplace that you can share where you can go put stuff. So you got a point where everybody can go to for the answers that you've come up with.
Yeah, definitely. And then, one other thing, you don't need to have this like written down or anything, but at least think in the back of your head, how are we going to handle conflict as a group? Because it will happen. You have 4, 5, 6 engineers working on a project, and something comes up that you didn't foresee, and you all have different opinions about how to move forward. At least decide whether you're going to, vote on it, whether you're going to flip a coin, because it might not, maybe it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. This
is another thing that we're trying to have done here at MSOE is making sure we have a written plan for how we deal with conflict. So another thing that you should have done already as a group is come up with a written plan for conflict. So it's good that you mentioned that, Ben.
That's good. Perfect. All right.
Yeah, and I guess part of that is that sometimes just had an instance last week where what you get to when you're doing hard engineering is it becomes personal, and you want to make sure that if you get to something that gets complicated, deal with it as adults. Try to keep the emotion out of it. Step back from things, because you want to maintain a good professional relationship and work through conflict in as rational way as you can.
Right. So the plan for conflict should not be take it to the parking lot.
All right. Anything else there, Ben?
Nope. I think we're probably at the point where we should open up for questions.
Yeah. So I'll leave this with the last thing. Dawn is the engine of war, and you can, as we say, polish the turd. So don't do that. Get to good enough. Get to definition of done, of whatever you define done being. and then move on so you can do more. That's a good thing to do.
Great. Well, really appreciate the talk. I guess we don't have any. Yeah, it's nice to have some contact information there. So take that with you. Nice to have the information. I know for my, we have a variety of different advisors for many groups here at MSOE for the seniors, and I think with my personal groups, I have someone who is like the project leader, and I think going forward, I'm going to sort of suggest that they put some effort and some time into some project planning. I think that's a good idea. I was kind of waiting for the seminar to do that with my specific groups, just because, I wanted to hear kind of what you guys had to say about the situation here. But really appreciate the insight here today. Doesn't look like we have any specific questions at the moment. A lot of people, wishing that you would have gotten more free soda.
Me too.
But, we have one here quickly. A student asks, how do you handle poor documentation or someone who's not sort of pulling their weight with some documentation required, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I'd probably try to, gently nudge them in the right direction. And if it, becomes a problem, that's something I would go to my project manager, but you guys don't really have it.
There you go. I have a personal, I have a history working for a company that had this like ISO 9000 certification, where they had very stringent requirements to meet this certification of how their hours were allotted and how many hours you spent on each project and all that sort of stuff. From a project management perspective, do you think that that's useful, or do you see that as sometimes too much micromanaging? Like, what's your opinion on that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, we live and die by it. I mean, we've got 500 engineers spread across 3 continents. And it's not uncommon. I've got engineers from 3 different places, from North Carolina, from Malaysia, and from the US, from here in Neenah, working on a project. And I have to cooperate with other teams. So we have a tool that manages everybody's hours by the week across, all these people. So it's a necessary evil. But coordinating that and coordinating with people who you're working with is crucial. So you get to, stuff that sounds kind of bean counterish, but in larger organizations where you're trying to really coordinate a lot of people, it gets a lot of the noise out of the way and allows you to do work rather than worrying about silly stuff like that.
Right. It is one thing that I personally have experienced and that I know is common in many companies, like when you actually go to work, is, they're going to track what projects you work on down to, 15-minute windows plus or minus. I mean, it's different with each place, but it's not uncommon to be tracking your work down to quarter-hour windows, right? So it's something that kind of takes people off guard when they actually go in the industry and actually see that. But you have to understand why that's done, and that's done from this project management perspective to make sure that you're allotting the amount of time that you deem appropriate for some certain activities. So it does seem a little bean counterish, but in the broader macro scope of things, I think it's generally a good thing.
Yeah, it is. And it's in some cases, you're billing your customer based upon hours spent. In other cases, it's a matter of just keeping track of, are you doing what needs to be done? That all that information can be used for good or for evil. I'd like to think that as a project manager, I'm using it for good, not to bludgeon people, but to go, okay, are we on track? Are we doing about the right thing? And
Sure.
If we're not, what could we do differently to support you or to be more efficient or make some trade-off?
Great. I have one last question, and this is just sort of related to something that we had talked about a couple of weeks ago in the Senior Design Seminar Series. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about graduate school and going back to graduate school and the pluses and minuses of working for a short time before going back to graduate school. I was advocating personally that going to graduate school right away is a better choice. But Ben, you have some experience here now doing some work and then deciding to sort of to go back for your doctorate. So maybe can you just talk about this for 1 minute and why you sort of decided to do it? I think maybe it's just something a lot of students here have considered and asked me about, and I just maybe wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience with this. So I did my undergrad straight into my master's at UW, and I did that because I wasn't sick of school because I had done a co-op. So I felt like I had basically some industry experience, and then I wanted to do my master's right away. And now going kind of out into industry for the past 10 years, I'm kind of redirecting my career back in a different direction. So I think it's hard to say that there's one solution for each person.
Right.
If your goal is to stay in academia, go right away, right? I think lost time is probably not the best thing there. But if you're not sure, don't go to grad school. I guess the best way to sum it up is you can financially justify a master's even if you're going to go into industry, but you can't financially justify a PhD if that's really to get you more towards a specific job that you want. So if you have that job that you want, go for the PhD. If not, get the experience and make sure that you know what you're doing is what you want to do.
Awesome. Excellent insight. And again, both you guys, thank you an incredible amount for taking time. Really do appreciate it. Nice little tag team. I enjoyed the comics as well. So that'll wrap it up for the seminar. Students, you can feel free to take off. And again, thank you very much, guys, for coming.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep.
Thank
Bye,
you
guys.
so much. Have a great Tuesday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.